Admiral Kextar had been patrolling the outer rim of space for 3 cycles now, and nothing interesting had happened. His void fleet consisted of 12 massive warships, each one capable of destroying entire planets. The reptilian commander stood on his bridge, watching the endless darkness of space through the viewing screen. His crew moved quietly around him, checking systems and monitoring long-range sensors. "Sir, all sectors remain clear," reported his second-in-command, a younger officer with bright green scales. "No unauthorized vessels detected in this region." Kextar nodded slowly. The outer rim was supposed to be empty. According to Imperial records, only primitive species lived in this part of the galaxy. Species that barely knew how to leave their home planets, let alone travel between stars. The Empire had been expanding outward for over 300 years, and they had never encountered serious resistance from any of the younger races. "Maintain standard patrol formation," Kextar ordered. "Keep sensors at maximum range." That's when everything changed. Space itself seemed to crack open like an egg. Not the familiar blue glow of hyperspace that every civilized species used for faster-than-light travel. Not the purple energy discharge of dimensional rifts. Not even the green shimmer of quantum tunnels. This was something completely different. Reality simply split apart, revealing a darkness that seemed deeper than space itself. "What in the void is that?" gasped the sensor operator, his clawed hands dancing across his controls. Before anyone could answer, something enormous emerged. From the crack in space, a warship unlike anything in Imperial records materialized directly in front of the fleet. The vessel was massive, easily matching the size of Kextar's flagship, but its design was completely alien. Where Imperial ships were built with flowing curves and organic shapes, this newcomer had sharp angles and geometric patterns. Its hull was a dark grey color that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Emergency stations!" Kextar roared. "All ships to defensive positions." Alarms blared throughout the fleet. 12 Imperial warships quickly formed a battle formation, their shields powering up and weapons charging. Energy readings spiked across every sensor display as the aliens prepared for combat. But the strangest part was what their sensors weren't detecting. The mysterious ship showed no energy signature at all. No power readings, no life signs, no engine emissions. It was as if the vessel existed but somehow didn't exist at the same time. "Sir, I'm getting no readings from that ship," reported the sensor operator, confusion clear in his voice. "It's like our equipment can't see it properly." "Impossible," Kextar hissed. "Imperial sensors can detect anything in space. Check your instruments." "I've run 3 full diagnostics, sir. Everything is working perfectly. That ship just doesn't register on our systems." Inside the human vessel, Captain Lee stood calmly on his bridge. He was a quiet man in his 40s, with short black hair and steady dark eyes. Unlike the chaos erupting on the alien ships around him, his crew worked with smooth efficiency. They had expected this reaction. "Status report," Lee said softly. "Phase drive shutdown complete, Captain," reported his navigation officer. "We've fully materialized in normal space." "All systems green," added the tactical officer. "The alien fleet has us surrounded, but they're maintaining defensive positions." Lee watched the alien ships through his own viewing screen. He could see their weapons powering up, their shields glowing with defensive energy. They were scared and scared. Beings often did foolish things. "Open communications on all frequencies," Lee ordered, his voice remaining calm and steady. The communications officer, a young woman named Park, worked quickly at her station. "Channels open, Captain. They should be able to receive us on any standard galactic frequency." Lee stepped forward, clasping his hands behind his back. He had practiced this moment many times, but now that it was actually happening, he felt the weight of history on his shoulders. This was humanity's first official contact with the galactic powers. Everything that happened next would determine whether his species would be welcomed as equals or dismissed as primitives. "This is Captain Lee of the human fleet vessel Dawns." "Edge," he said clearly. "We come in peace and seek dialogue with your commanders. We mean no harm to your ships or your people." The response was immediate silence. Lee could imagine the confusion and fear spreading through the alien fleet. They had never encountered technology that could bypass their sensors so completely. The tension in Admiral Kextar's command chamber was thick enough to cut with a blade. 3 hours had passed since the mysterious human ship had appeared from nowhere, and the Imperial fleet remained locked in a standoff. Kextar paced back and forth on his bridge, his reptilian features twisted with frustration and curiosity. "Sir, the humans are requesting permission to send a representative aboard our flagship," reported his communications officer, trying to keep the nervousness out of his voice. Kextar stopped pacing. In 3 centuries of Imperial expansion, no primitive species had ever made such a bold request. Most younger races either fled in terror or attacked desperately when confronted by the Imperial fleet. None had ever calmly asked for a diplomatic meeting. "A single representative?" Kextar asked, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air nervously. "Yes, sir. They're requesting safe passage for someone called Commander Park. They say she has full authority to negotiate on behalf of humanity." The Admiral's scaled hands drummed against his command console. Every instinct told him this was dangerous. These humans had already demonstrated technology that defied Imperial understanding. Who knew what other surprises they might have? But his curiosity was stronger than his caution. The Empire needed to understand how these beings had developed such advanced capabilities. Grant them permission, Kextar decided, but maintain full security protocols. "I want guards stationed throughout the ship, and keep our weapons charged." "Understood, sir." What happened next left the Imperial crew speechless. Instead of launching a shuttle or requesting coordinates for a transport beam, the human simply appeared in the middle of Kextar's command chamber. One moment the space was empty. The next moment a human woman stood there as if she had always been present. Commander Park was shorter than most Imperial officers, with shoulder-length black hair and intelligent dark eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform with minimal decorations, but carried herself with quiet confidence. What struck Kextar most was how completely calm she seemed, as if materializing inside an alien warship surrounded by armed guards was perfectly normal. "Greetings, Admiral," Park said, offering a slight bow. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Kextar's jaw dropped. The human was speaking perfect Imperial Standard, the official language of the Dominion. Her accent was flawless, her grammar precise. It was impossible. Imperial Standard had never been transmitted beyond the core worlds, and certainly never toward the primitive outer rim where humans supposedly lived. How do you speak our language?" Kextar stammered, forgetting his diplomatic training. Park touched a small device attached to her collar. It looked like nothing more than a simple metal pin, but Kextar's trained eye recognized advanced technology when he saw it. "Universal Translator," she explained simply. "It analyzes speech patterns and converts meaning in real time." The Admiral's scientific advisor, an elderly reptilian with deep purple scales, pushed forward from the crowd of observers. "Impossible," he wheezed. "Universal translation requires quantum processing power beyond anything we've achieved. The computational requirements alone would need a facility the size of a small moon." Park smiled politely. "We've found ways to miniaturize our technology." Kextar regained his composure and gestured for his guards to lower their weapons slightly. "Commander Park, I am Admiral Kextar of the 3rd Imperial Fleet. I must ask you directly, how did your ship travel here? Our sensors detected no hyperspace signature, no dimensional rifts, no energy buildup of any kind. You simply appeared." "That's because we don't use hyperspace," Park replied, clasping her hands behind her back in a relaxed pose. "We've developed what we call phase drive technology. Instead of traveling through alternate dimensions, we fold normal space itself." The scientific advisor made a choking sound. "Space folding is a theoretical impossibility. The energy requirements would be astronomical. No civilization has ever managed to manipulate space-time on that scale." Park's smile widened slightly. "Your scientists concluded it was impossible because they approached the problem incorrectly. They tried to brute force their way through the physics. We learned to work with space-time instead of against it." Kextar felt a chill run down his spine. If humans had truly mastered space manipulation, it would revolutionize everything the Empire thought they knew about faster-than-light travel. More importantly, It would make human ships nearly impossible to track or intercept. Our scientists have studied space folding for over 200 years, Kekstar said carefully. Every simulation, every theoretical model, every practical experiment has failed. What did your people discover that we missed? Park looked around the command chamber, taking in the advanced Imperial technology surrounding them. With respect, Admiral, your scientists were looking at the problem from the wrong angle. They were trying to force space to bend according to their will. Humans learned to listen to what space wanted to do naturally. Space doesn't want anything, the scientific advisor protested. It's not alive, isn't it? Park asked quietly. Space-time responds to mass, energy, gravity, quantum fluctuations. It's constantly moving, constantly changing, constantly adapting. We just learn to move with it instead of fighting against it. The implications hit Kekstar like a physical blow. If humans could manipulate space-time with such ease, they possessed strategic capabilities that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Your empire has ruled this region for 3 centuries, Park continued. Your scientists have had access to resources from thousands of worlds, billions of minds working on these problems. Yet a single species, isolated on the galactic rim, managed to solve what you couldn't. Kekstar's pride stung, but he had to admit the human had a point. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Admiral, that perhaps your empire's approach to science and technology has become limited by its own success. The Imperial Research Station Nexus 7 had never hosted such an unusual gathering. 23 of the Empire's most brilliant scientists sat around a circular table, their various alien features all showing the same expression of skeptical curiosity. At the head of the table stood a single human woman, Dr. Kim, who looked remarkably ordinary compared to the exotic beings surrounding her. Dr. Kim was in her 30s, with neat black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing a plain, white lab coat over casual clothes. She carried only a small briefcase and seemed completely comfortable despite being outnumbered by some of the most powerful minds in the galaxy. Chief Scientist Velthar, a tall being with blue-tinted skin and forearms, leaned forward in his chair. His species had been studying advanced physics for over 1,000 years, and he personally held 17 advanced degrees in theoretical science. Dr. Kim, he said in a voice that barely concealed his condescension, we appreciate your willingness to share information, but I must be frank. Your claims about space-folding technology contradict fundamental laws of physics. The other scientists murmured their agreement. Dr. Zenthok, whose crystalline body sparkled with internal light, added, we've calculated the energy requirements for manipulating space-time on the scale you describe. It would require the power output of an entire star, focused through machinery the size of a small planet. Kim smiled patiently and opened her briefcase. Inside, cushioned in soft foam, lay what looked like a simple crystal about the size of her fist. It was clear as glass but seemed to contain swirling patterns of light that moved in impossible ways. This is a phase drive core, she said simply. The room fell silent. Dr. Velthar's 4 eyes widened as he stared at the tiny crystal. That small thing powers your faster-than-light travel. One of them, yes, Kim confirmed. Our larger ships use arrays of 12 to 15 cores, but a single core is enough to fold space for a vessel the size of a shuttle. Professor Krathan, a gas-based being who communicated through color changes in his containment suit, flickered rapidly between purple and orange, the equivalent of excited stammering. The energy density alone should cause that crystal to collapse. Into a black hole, his translator announced. Kim carefully lifted the crystal from its case. Several scientists instinctively leaned back, but Kim held it casually in her palm. That's where your calculations go wrong, she explained. You're thinking about energy the same way you think about fuel, something that gets consumed and depleted. Phase drive cores don't consume energy. They redirect it. Redirect it from where? Demanded Dr. Velthar. From space itself, Kim replied. Space-time isn't empty. It's full of quantum fluctuations, virtual particles popping in and out of existence, dark energy constantly pushing the universe apart. We learn to tap into that natural flow instead of fighting against it. The scientific advisor, who had accompanied Admiral Kextar shook his scaled head vigorously. Even if such a thing were possible, the computational requirements would be staggering. You would need quantum processors more advanced than anything in Imperial technology. Kim gestured to the crystal in her hand. The crystal does the computing. It's not just a power source. It's a living quantum computer grown from modified space-time itself. Living, whispered Dr. Velthar. You're claiming this crystal is alive? Not alive in the biological sense, Kim clarified, but it responds to space-time fluctuations the way a plant responds to sunlight. It naturally seeks the path of least resistance through folded space. The room erupted in a dozen different languages as scientists argued among themselves. Finally, Dr. Velthar raised all four arms for silence. Dr. Kim, with all due respect, what you're describing sounds more like magic than science. Kim's smile grew wider. Arthur C. Clarke, one of our ancient philosophers, once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But let me show you something that might help. She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a device that looked like a simple remote control. This is a portable phase generator, much smaller than what we use for starships, but it operates on the same principles. What exactly does it do? Asked Professor Krathan, his containment suit flickering with nervous yellow light. It creates a small spacefold, Kim explained. Nothing dramatic, just enough to demonstrate the principle. She looked around the room. I should warn you, this might feel a bit strange. Before anyone could object, Kim pressed a button on the device. The crystal in her other hand began to glow with soft blue light, and suddenly the entire research station seemed to shift. For just a moment, everyone in the room had the bizarre sensation of being in two places at once. The walls appeared to stretch and bend, and through the viewing ports the stars outside seemed to flicker between two different positions. The effect lasted only 3 seconds, but it left every scientist in the room speechless. Dr. Velthar's usually steady hands were trembling as he checked his instruments. According to our sensors, he said in a voice barely above a whisper, this entire station just existed in 2 different locations simultaneously. Kim calmly switched off the device and returned the crystal to its case. A basic demonstration of space folding, she said, as if she had just shown them a simple card trick. Your mathematics were correct about the energy requirements and the theoretical framework, but your imagination was limited by thinking inside the boundaries of what you already knew. The silence in the room was deafening. These were beings who had dedicated their lives to pushing the boundaries of scientific knowledge, and a human with a briefcase had just rewritten everything they thought they understood about the universe. The Imperial throne room had never witnessed such chaos. Emperor Thesel, a massive being with golden scales and piercing red eyes, sat on his crystal throne while dozens of his top military commanders argued loudly around him. Holographic displays flickered throughout the vast chamber, each one showing reports from different corners of the Empire. Your Majesty, called out General Vorthak, his voice cutting through the noise, we're receiving similar reports from all 12 sectors. Human vessels have appeared near our most sensitive installations. The Emperor's clawed hand gripped the armrest of his throne. For over 300 years, the Dominion Empire had expanded across the galaxy without facing serious resistance. Younger species either submitted peacefully or were quickly conquered. No one had ever challenged Imperial authority so boldly. Show me the tactical display, Thesal commanded, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. A massive 3-dimensional map of the galaxy materialized in the center of the room. Red dots marked Imperial installations, military bases, research facilities, administrative centers, and fortress worlds. But now scattered throughout the display, blue dots indicated human ship positions. There were dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Admiral Kextar stepped forward, still shaken from his encounter with the humans. Your Majesty, they're not attacking or making demands. They're just there, watching, waiting. How many ships? The Emperor asked. We don't know, Kextar admitted reluctantly. They appear and disappear without warning. Our sensors can barely detect them when they want to be seen. When they don't, He gestured helplessly at the display. We might be. Looking at 50 ships or 500. Defense Minister Kelthar, an elderly being with cybernetic implants covering half his face, pulled up detailed sensor readings. The pattern is clearly coordinated, Your Majesty. These aren't random appearances. Every human vessel is positioned strategically near our most important facilities. What kind of facilities? Thysol demanded. Military command centers, weapons research labs, shipyards, communication hubs, Kelthar listed grimly. They've identified our most vital infrastructure with surgical precision. The implications sent a chill through the room. For the humans to know exactly where to position their ships, they would need detailed intelligence about Imperial operations. Intelligence that should have been impossible for an isolated Rim species to obtain. Your Majesty, interrupted communications. Director Felon rushing into the chamber with a glowing datapad. We're receiving a message. It's being broadcast simultaneously to every Imperial world, every military installation, every government facility in the Empire. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Simultaneously? That's impossible. It would require access to our entire communication network. Yes, Your Majesty, but it's happening. Play the message. Captain Lee's calm voice filled the throne room, speaking in perfect Imperial standard. The image showed him standing on the bridge of his ship, hands clasped behind his back, looking directly into the camera with steady confidence. Citizens and leaders of the Dominion Empire, Lee began, I am Captain Lee of the human fleet. We come to you not as conquerors, but as neighbors announcing our presence. For too long, humanity has remained isolated on the galactic rim while your empire expanded toward our territories. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the assembled commanders. The human spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to command, not the desperation of a primitive species begging for mercy. We do not seek conflict with your people, Lee continued, but we will not allow our worlds to be absorbed into your empire. Effective immediately, we claim sovereign territory around our home systems and colonies. These borders are not negotiable. General Vorthak snarled, his reptilian features twisting with anger. The arrogance! A Rim species making demands of the Empire. But Lee wasn't finished. We have positioned monitoring vessels near your major installations as a demonstration of our capabilities. These ships carry no offensive weapons and pose no threat to your people. They are simply there to ensure you understand that we can reach any point in your territory, whenever we choose. The tactical display updated again, showing new blue dots appearing even as they watched, more human ships materializing near Imperial facilities in real time. We hope for peaceful coexistence between our peoples, Lee's message concluded, but make no mistake, we will defend our independence with every means at our disposal. We suggest opening diplomatic channels within the next standard week. Captain Lee, out. The throne room fell silent as the message ended. Emperor Thisol sat motionless on his throne, processing what he had just witnessed. A species, the Empire, had barely noticed was now holding the entire Dominion hostage with technology that defied understanding. Your Majesty, Admiral Kextar said quietly, how do we respond to this? The Emperor's red eyes gleamed with a mixture of anger and grudging. Respect. In 3 centuries of rule, no one had ever spoken to him as an equal. The human captain had addressed the Empire not as a supplicant begging for mercy, but as a leader negotiating between sovereign powers. They have our attention, Thysol said finally. The question is, what do we do with theirs? Defense Minister. Kelthar stepped forward. Your Majesty, we could mobilize the full Imperial fleet, overwhelm them with sheer numbers. And attack what? The Emperor countered. Ships that can appear and disappear at will? Vessels our sensors can barely detect? Admiral Kextar, what is your assessment of their military capabilities? Kextar hesitated. Unknown, Your Majesty. But if their defensive technology matches their propulsion systems... He trailed off, leaving the implications unspoken. The Emperor rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. For the first time in his long reign, he faced an opponent he couldn't simply crush through superior force. The humans had demonstrated something far more dangerous than powerful weapons. They had shown superior strategy. Summon the full war. Council, Thysol commanded. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. The Imperial War Council had been meeting for 6 straight hours, and tempers were running hot. Emperor Thistle sat at the head of a massive oval table, surrounded by his most trusted military advisors. Holographic star charts floated above the table, showing human ship positions that seemed to multiply every hour. General Zothak, the Empire's most aggressive commander, slammed his fist on the table. His scarred face bore the marks of a dozen successful campaigns, and his reputation for crushing rebellions was legendary throughout Imperial space. Your Majesty, we're treating these humans like they're our equals. They're a single species from the Outer Rim, one species against an empire of thousands of worlds. Admiral Kextar shook his head. General, you didn't see their technology firsthand. Their capabilities are unknown, Zothak interrupted. Exactly my point. We're making decisions based on fear of the unknown. The Empire has faced advanced technology before. We adapt, we overcome, we conquer. Defense Minister Kelthar pulled up tactical assessments. General, our analysts estimate they have at least 200 ships positioned throughout our territory. Each one could potentially do what? Zothak stood up, his imposing figure casting a shadow across the table. We're speculating about maybes and possibilities while they occupy our space unopposed. Your Majesty, the Empire's strength has always been decisive action. Emperor Thistle leaned back in his throne-like chair, studying the passionate general. Zothak had never lost a battle in 30 years of service. His aggressive tactics had brought dozens of systems under Imperial control. But this situation was different from anything they had faced before. What are you proposing, General? The Emperor asked. Zothak activated a tactical display showing Imperial fleet positions. They cannot be everywhere at once, Your Majesty. Yes, they have ships near our major installations, but what about their own territory? We strike at one of their colonies with overwhelming force, make them choose between defending their people or maintaining their positions in our space. The logic was simple and brutal, exactly the kind of strategy that had built the Empire. Force the enemy to make an impossible choice, then exploit their moment of weakness. Which target? Thistle inquired. The colony they call Harmony, Zothak replied, highlighting a system on the Outer Rim. According to our intelligence, it's one of their newer settlements, lightly defended, mostly civilian population. We show up with 1,000 ships and demonstrate what happens when someone challenges Imperial authority. Admiral Kexatar looked uncomfortable. General, if we're wrong about their capabilities, then we learn something valuable. Zothak cut him off. But if we're right, we end this standoff quickly and restore Imperial prestige. Your Majesty, the longer we hesitate, the more our authority appears weakened. Other species are watching. If we allow humans to dictate terms to the Empire, how long before others try the same? The Emperor considered this. Reports were already coming in from border regions where subject species were becoming restless, inspired by humanity's bold challenge to imperial power. The Dominion's strength had always rested on the perception of invincibility. How quickly can you assemble a fleet? Thistle asked. Zothak smiled grimly. Give me 12 hours, Your Majesty. I'll take the 3rd, 7th, and 9th battle fleets, 1,000 of our finest warships. If the humans want to play games with the Empire, let's show them the consequences. 12 hours later, the largest Imperial armada assembled in generations jumped toward the Harmony system. General Zothak commanded from his flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Around him, 1,000 Imperial vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Sensor sweep, Zothak ordered. Immediately. I want to know everything in this system. Sir, reported his tactical officer, we're detecting 50 vessels in orbit around the colony world. Human design, but they're not running. Zothak frowned. 50 ships against 1,000 should have prompted immediate retreat or desperate calls for reinforcement. Instead, the human vessels maintained calm orbital positions as if they had been expecting this visit. Open communications, Zothak commanded. Let's see how brave they are when facing real Imperial might. The response came immediately. Captain Park's voice was steady and professional, without a trace of fear or panic. Imperial vessels, you seem to have wandered off course. This is the Harmony system, sovereign human territory. Please state your business. The casual tone infuriated Zothak. Here was a human captain, outnumbered 20-1, speaking as if she held the superior position. "This is General Zothak of the Dominion Empire. You are in violation of Imperial space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "General," Park replied calmly, "I'm afraid you're mistaken. This system was claimed by humanity 6 months ago. We filed all the proper territorial notifications. Perhaps your navigation systems need updating." Around the bridge, Zothak's officers exchanged nervous glances. The human captain was treating this like a routine border dispute, not a life-or-death confrontation with overwhelming enemy forces. "We are the Dominion Empire," Zothak roared, his voice carrying across the communication channel. "We do not recognize your territorial claims. You will surrender this system or be destroyed." The silence that followed stretched for several seconds. When Park finally responded, her voice was even quieter than before, but somehow carried more weight than all of Zothak's shouting. "General, we are humanity. We do not yield our worlds to anyone. If you wish to test our resolve, you're welcome to try. But I should warn you, those 50 ships you're looking at, they're not alone." Before Zothak could demand an explanation, his sensor operator called out in alarm, "Sir, new contacts appearing throughout the system, hundreds of them." Tactical display lit up with blue dots as human vessels materialized around the Imperial fleet. They hadn't jumped in through hyperspace. They had simply appeared, surrounding the 1,000 Imperial ships in a 3-dimensional web of potential threat. General Zothak stared at his tactical display in disbelief. What had been 50 human ships moments before was now over 300 vessels surrounding his 1,000-ship armada. The humans had somehow hidden an entire fleet in normal space, invisible to Imperial sensors until they chose to reveal themselves. "Sir, how do we proceed?" asked his tactical officer, trying to keep the nervousness out of his voice. Zothak's pride burned hotter than his fear. He had built his reputation on decisive action and overwhelming force. No primitive species was going to make him back down, regardless of their strange technology. "All ships, battle formation 7. Target the nearest human vessels and prepare to fire." The Imperial fleet moved with practiced efficiency, 1,000 warships arranging themselves into attack formations that had conquered dozens of worlds. Weapon systems charged, shields powered up to maximum strength, and targeting computers locked onto human vessels. "Fire at will," Zothak commanded. The space around Harmony erupted in brilliant flashes of energy as 1,000 Imperial ships opened fire simultaneously. Streams of plasma, particle beams, and quantum torpedoes streaked toward their targets. It was enough firepower to destroy entire planetary defense fleets, but the human ships simply weren't there anymore. "What happened?" Zothak demanded as his weapons struck empty space. "Where did they go?" Before anyone could answer, explosions rocked the Imperial fleet from behind. Human vessels had somehow appeared in the rear formations, striking with pinpoint accuracy at engine systems and shield generators. The attacks weren't designed to destroy. They were surgical strikes meant to disable. "They're behind us," shouted the sensor operator. "How did they get behind us?" Admiral Han watched the battle unfold from the bridge of her flagship, the Aurora's Dawn. Unlike the chaos erupting on Imperial vessels, her bridge was a model of calm efficiency. Officers worked quietly at their stations, while holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in the battle. "Phase jump complete on squadrons 7 through 12, reported her tactical officer. "Imperial Formation Alpha is now surrounded." Han nodded approvingly. "Execute Pattern Delta. I want continuous pressure on their flanks." The human fleet moved like nothing the Empire had ever encountered. Ships would vanish from one position and instantly appear in another, striking quickly, before disappearing again. It was like fighting ghosts that could become solid long enough to bite. General Zothak tried to adapt his tactics, ordering his ships to spread out and cover more angles of attack. But every time the Imperial formation changed, the humans adapted faster. They seemed to anticipate his moves before he made them. "Sir, we're taking heavy damage across all squadrons," reported his damage control officer. "They're targeting our engines and weapons systems specifically. It's like they know exactly where to hit us. Return fire. All ships concentrate on Sector 7. The Imperial fleet poured weapons fire into the designated area, but once again struck empty space. The human ships had already moved, appearing now on the opposite side of the formation to continue their precise attacks. Captain Park's voice came across the communication channels, still calm despite the chaos of battle. "General Zothak, you're fighting a war that ended before it started. Your ships are powerful, but power without precision is just noise." "We have you outnumbered 3-1, Zothak roared back. "Numbers don't matter when you can't hit your target," Park replied. "Admiral Han, show them what we mean." Suddenly, every human ship in the battle vanished simultaneously. For a moment, the Imperial fleet found itself alone in space, weapons firing at nothing. Then the humans reappeared, not scattered throughout the battle zone, but concentrated in a perfect sphere around Zothak's flagship. "Impossible," whispered the general's tactical officer. "They just coordinated a simultaneous phase jump for 300 ships." The demonstration lasted only seconds before the human vessels spread out again, returning to their hit-and-run tactics. But the message was clear. They could strike anywhere, anytime, with perfect coordination. For 3 hours, the battle continued. The Imperial fleet, despite its numerical advantage and superior firepower, found itself slowly being dismantled, not destroyed. The humans seemed determined to avoid unnecessary casualties, but methodically disabled. Ship after ship lost engines, weapons or shields to precise human strikes. Admiral Han coordinated the entire engagement, like a conductor leading an orchestra. Squadron 15, target the command ship's secondary systems. Squadron 23, disable the Dreadnought's main engines. Keep the pressure steady, but avoid their life support systems. The Imperial fleet began to fall apart. Ships drifted helplessly with disabled engines, while others tried desperately to target enemies that refused to stay in one place long enough to be hit. Morale crumbled as proud Imperial officers realized they were being systematically outfought by an enemy they couldn't even properly engage. Finally, General Zothak made the hardest decision of his military career. "All ships, prepare for emergency hyperspace jump, we're withdrawing." The retreat was chaotic and humiliating. Imperial ships jumped away in small groups, many trailing atmosphere from hull breaches or limping along on damaged engines. In 3 hours of combat, not a single human vessel had been destroyed, while over 200 Imperial ships required major repairs. As the last Imperial vessel prepared to jump to hyperspace, Captain Park's final transmission reached General Zothak's flagship. Her voice was polite, but carried an undertone of steel that would haunt his dreams. "General, thank you for the demonstration. You've helped us calibrate our defensive systems quite nicely. Next time you visit human space, try knocking first. We might actually let you in." The implications were clear. This hadn't been a desperate battle for survival. It had been a training exercise for the humans, a chance to test their capabilities against Imperial technology. And they had passed with flying colors. The defeat at Harmony had sent shockwaves throughout the Dominion Empire. For 6 months, the galaxy's most powerful civilization had been frozen in place, unable to advance and unwilling to retreat. Imperial expansion, which had continued steadily for 3 centuries, ground to a complete halt. In the Imperial capital, Emperor Thisal spent sleepless nights staring at strategic maps that no longer made sense. Red zones marked Imperial territory, but scattered throughout were blue dots representing human ships that came and went like phantoms. His military advisors argued endlessly about response strategies, but every plan seemed to end the same way, with Imperial forces firing at empty space while human vessels struck from impossible angles. The humans, meanwhile, had established a new routine that was driving Imperial commanders to distraction. Their ships would appear near Imperial installations, conduct what appeared to be routine patrols, then vanish without warning. Sometimes they stayed for hours, sometimes for minutes. There was no pattern the Empire could predict or counter. Admiral Kextar had started keeping a personal log of human sightings, hoping to find some logic in their movements. But the more data he collected, the more random their appearances seemed. One day, 3 human ships would monitor a weapons testing facility. The next day, a single vessel would appear near a civilian trade route, scan passing merchant ships politely, then disappear. It's psychological warfare, Defense Minister Kelthar had concluded during one particularly frustrating briefing. They're keeping us off balance, making us jump at shadows. But Emperor Thesol suspected there was more to it than that. The humans weren't just demonstrating their ability to reach Imperial territory, they were mapping it, learning patrol, routes, studying defensive positions, cataloguing every installation and facility in the Empire. They were gathering intelligence while appearing to do nothing more than casual observation. The economic impact was becoming severe. Imperial expansion had always driven economic growth, opening new markets and resource worlds. With expansion halted, unemployment was rising on core worlds, and subject species were beginning to question whether Imperial protection was worth the cost of Imperial taxes. Finally, after 6 months of this impossible stalemate, Emperor Thesial made a decision that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. He would send an ambassador to the humans. Not to negotiate, the Empire did not negotiate with primitives, but to assess their true capabilities and perhaps find a diplomatic solution that would allow Imperial expansion to resume. Ambassador Melthor was chosen for this delicate mission. A career diplomat with 40 years of experience, he had successfully negotiated surrender terms with dozens of species. His specialty was making weaker civilizations understand the futility of resisting Imperial power. The human colony of New Sol had been selected as the meeting point. It was one of humanity's newer settlements, established only 5 years earlier on a world at the edge of what humans now claimed as their territory. Imperial intelligence suggested it would be lightly defended and sparsely populated, the perfect place to demonstrate that humanity's bold claims exceeded their actual capabilities. Melthor's diplomatic vessel dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find a struggling frontier outpost. Instead, New Sol presented itself as a thriving hub of activity. The planet glowed with the lights of major cities, orbital stations bustled with commercial traffic, and defensive platforms dotted the system with quiet efficiency. "This is Captain Cho of New Sol Defense Command," came a transmission as soon as Melthor's ship appeared. "Ambassador Melthor, you're cleared for docking at Station Alpha. Welcome to human space." The casual greeting irked the ambassador. Where were the formal protocols, the proper recognition of Imperial status, the nervous deference that other species showed when granted an audience with Imperial representatives? Station Alpha was impressive, despite its relatively recent construction. The docking facilities could accommodate vessels much larger than Melthor's diplomatic ship, and the corridors buzzed with activity from dozens of different species, many of whom Melthor recognized as former Imperial subjects. Captain Cho met him at the airlock, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform without excessive decoration, but carried herself with the quiet confidence that seemed common among human officers. "Ambassador Melthor," Cho said with a slight bow, "thank you for making the journey. I hope your trip was pleasant." "It was educational," Melthor replied carefully. The casual friendliness in Cho's manner was unnerving. Most species treated Imperial ambassadors with either fear or desperate eagerness to please. Cho led him through the station's main corridors, pointing out various facilities along the way. "We're quite proud of what we've built here. 5 years. Ergo, this was an empty system. Now we're home to over 6 million people from 23 different species." 23 species? Melthor couldn't hide his surprise. "Including former Imperial subjects?" "Former and current," Cho confirmed cheerfully. "We don't ask too many questions about people's backgrounds. If they want to build a new life in human space, they're welcome." They arrived at a comfortable conference room with a view of the planet below. Cho gestured for Melthor to take a seat, then activated a privacy screen to ensure their conversation wouldn't be overheard. "So," Cho said, settling into her own chair, "I assume your Emperor wishes to discuss terms for ending this stalemate?" Melthor straightened in his chair, drawing on decades of diplomatic training. "The Empire does not negotiate with primitives. We are here to assess your situation and determine whether some accommodation might be reached that serves both our interests." Cho's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. "Primitives? That's an interesting choice of words, considering recent events." "One engagement does not determine the balance of power in the galaxy, Melthor replied stiffly. The Empire has resources and capabilities your people cannot imagine. I'm sure that's true, Cho agreed pleasantly. She stood and walked to the viewing window, gesturing toward the stars beyond. Your empire is vast and powerful. 300 worlds, billions of subjects, fleets that have conquered everything in their path. Melthor relaxed slightly. Finally, some proper recognition of imperial might. But, Cho continued, still looking out at the stars, those same fleets haven't moved an inch in 6 months. Your expansion has stopped completely. Your economy is struggling without new conquests to fuel it, and every day more of your subjects find their way to human space, looking for something your empire apparently can't provide. The casual dismissal hit Melthor like a physical blow. You cannot seriously believe that a single species can stand against the might of the Dominion Empire. Cho turned back to face him, her expression still friendly but now tinged with something that might have been pity. Ambassador, we're not standing against your empire. We're simply refusing to be absorbed by it. There's a difference. The result is the same. You are blocking imperial expansion. Your expansion stopped because you chose to stop it, Cho corrected. We never threatened your existing territory. We simply claimed our own and demonstrated that we could defend it. If you want to continue expanding, there's a whole galaxy out there, just not in our direction. Melthor felt the conversation slipping away from him. This wasn't how negotiations were supposed to go. The Empire has ruled this galaxy for 3 centuries, and you can continue ruling it for 3 more, Cho said with a shrug. Just not all of it. Enjoy your new borders, Ambassador. I think you'll find them quite spacious. The neutral station crossroads had been hastily constructed in the void between Imperial and human space, a testament to how quickly the galaxy's political landscape had changed. Built jointly by both sides over the past 3 months, it served as the first truly neutral territory either civilization had ever acknowledged. The station's simple, functional design reflected humanity's practical approach to engineering, while its size and grandeur satisfied imperial requirements for diplomatic dignity. Captain Lee stood in the main observation deck, watching transport ships arrive from across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species had come to witness what many were calling the most significant treaty signing in galactic history. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Dominion Empire was formally recognizing another power as an equal. Nervous? Asked Commander Park, joining Lee at the viewing window. Lee shook his head slightly. Not nervous, just aware of the weight of this moment. We're not just signing a treaty. We're changing how the galaxy thinks about power and sovereignty. The past year had been a whirlwind of careful diplomacy and quiet demonstrations of strength. After Ambassador Melthor's unsuccessful mission to New Sol, Emperor Thisal had finally accepted that humanity could not be conquered, intimidated, or ignored. The humans had made their point clear through actions rather than words. They could reach any corner of imperial space, but chose not to abuse that capability. Admiral Kextar arrived early for the ceremony, as was his habit. The reptilian officer, had changed considerably since his first encounter with human technology. The arrogance and certainty that had defined his career had been replaced by cautious respect and genuine curiosity about these strange beings from the galactic rim. Captain Lee, Kextar said, offering the formal bow that Imperial protocol required when greeting equals. I trust you're satisfied with the final treaty terms. They're fair, Lee replied simply. That's all we ever wanted, fairness. The treaty itself was surprisingly brief for such a momentous document. Humanity would retain sovereignty over their home system and 27 colony worlds, along with exclusive expansion rights in their sector of the galaxy. The Empire would maintain all existing territory, but would halt expansion toward human space. Most importantly, both sides agreed to respect each other's territorial boundaries and resolve disputes through diplomacy rather than force. What made the treaty truly revolutionary were the smaller clauses that had been quietly included. Any species wishing to leave imperial rule and join humanity would be allowed to do so freely. Independent worlds could request human protection without automatically becoming imperial subjects. Most significantly, the Empire agreed to establish elected councils on all member worlds, a first step toward the democratic reforms that many species had been demanding for generations. "It's hard to believe," Kextar said as they walked toward the signing ceremony. "A year ago, I thought humanity was just another primitive species ripe for conquest. Now, Lee prompted, now the Empire is changing its fundamental approach." "To governance because of what you've shown us," Kextar finished. "Your species has forced us to reconsider not just our expansion policies, but our entire philosophy of rule." The ceremony itself was held in the station's largest hall, with representatives seated according to careful diplomatic protocol. Emperor Thaisal attended via holographic projection, his massive golden form dominating one side of the room. Captain Lee represented humanity in person, flanked by a small delegation of human officers and civilians. The formal speeches were predictably long and full of diplomatic language, but the moment that would be remembered by history came when Admiral Kextar stepped forward to address the assembled delegates. "For 3 centuries," Kextar began, his voice carrying across the silent hall, "the Dominion Empire has expanded through superior technology and overwhelming force. We believed that strength alone determined who ruled and who served. The humans have taught us that we were wrong." Murmurs rippled through the audience. It was unprecedented for an Imperial officer to publicly acknowledge any limitation of Imperial power. "Humanity possesses technology that exceeds our own in some areas," Kextar continued. "But more importantly, they have shown us something we had forgotten. That true strength lies not in the ability to conquer, but in the wisdom to know when conquest is unnecessary." Captain Lee rose to respond, keeping his words simple and direct. "Admiral Kextar speaks of wisdom, but I prefer to think of it as common sense. We don't seek your territory because we have no need for it. We don't seek to rule other species because we're too busy governing ourselves. We protect our own because that's what any reasonable people would do." The signing itself took only minutes. 2 signatures on a document that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. But as Lee set down his pen and shook hands with Admiral Kextar, both officers knew they were witnessing more than just a treaty signing. "This changes everything," Kextar said quietly. Lee nodded. "For the better, I hope. The galaxy is big enough for all of us, Admiral. We just needed to figure out how to share it." Within hours of the signing, news of the Treaty of Stellar Equilibrium spread throughout the galaxy. On dozens of worlds, species that had been Imperial subjects for generations began demanding their own representation and rights. The Empire, bound by the precedent set with humanity, found itself forced to negotiate rather than simply impose its will. The balance of power that had remained unchanged for 3 centuries shifted in a single day. Not through war or conquest, but through the simple recognition that strength and wisdom were not the same thing. Humanity had proven that sometimes the most powerful action was knowing when not to act at all. Captain Lee stood once more at the observation deck, watching ships depart to carry news of the treaty across the galaxy. Commander Park joined him again, both officers contemplating the new future they had helped create. "Do you think it will last?" Park asked. "The treaty? Probably. Not in its current form," Lee admitted, "but the principle behind it, that's something that can't be unsigned. We've shown the galaxy that there are alternatives to conquest and submission. That's a lesson that won't be forgotten." 1 year after the Treaty of Stellar Equilibrium, the galaxy looked like a completely different place. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Morning Star, watching the steady flow of traffic through what had once been contested space. Merchant vessels from dozens of species moved freely between systems, no longer requiring imperial permits or paying tribute to distant governors. Park had been promoted to Admiral of Human Space Command 6 months earlier, taking over from Captain Lee, who had accepted a position as humanity's first galactic ambassador. The job was more complex than anyone had anticipated. What started as simple border patrol had evolved into something resembling galactic peacekeeping. "Admiral," called her communications officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Captain Cho at the frontier station." "Put her through," Park replied, settling into her command chair. Captain Cho's familiar face appeared on the main screen, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. Behind her, the busy operations center of Frontier Station Beta hummed with activity. The station had been built only 8 months ago, but it already served as a hub for 3 different trade routes. "Admiral, I have an update from the outer regions," Cho began. 3 more species have formally requested human protection. The Velthari from the Kepler system, the crystal beings from Andros Prime, and believe it or not, the aquatic Merkoth from the water worlds. Park nodded thoughtfully. This was becoming a pattern. As word spread about human protection policies, more and more species were seeking alternatives to imperial rule. Unlike the Empire's approach of forced integration, humanity offered something different: protection without absorption. "What's their situation?" Park asked. "The Velthari are facing pressure from imperial tax collectors who want to triple their tribute payments," Cho explained. "The Andros crystals are being forced to relocate from their homeworld because the Empire wants to strip mine their planet for rare minerals. The Merkoth are the most interesting case. They've been trying to break away from imperial rule for 50 years, but they lack the military strength to defend themselves." The irony wasn't lost on Park. A year ago, humanity had been an unknown species on the galactic rim. Now they were receiving requests for protection from civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. But it made sense in a way. Humanity's unique technology and demonstrated willingness to stand up to the Empire made them the only viable alternative to imperial rule. "What's our current capacity?" Park asked her strategic advisor, Commander Kim. Kim consulted his datapad. "We currently provide protection services to 47 independent worlds and space stations. Our patrol schedules are stretched thin, but manageable. Adding 3 more systems would require deploying additional vessels from the reserve fleet." "Do it," Park decided, "but make sure each species understands our terms. We provide protection and trade assistance, but we don't govern. They maintain their own governments, their own laws, their own cultures. We're partners, not rulers." This philosophy had become the cornerstone of human foreign policy. Unlike the Empire, which imposed uniform laws and customs across all member worlds, humanity celebrated diversity. Protected species were encouraged to maintain their unique traditions while benefiting from mutual defense and free trade. The results had been remarkable. In the past year, 12 systems had declared independence from the Empire, knowing they could count on human support if imperial forces tried to reconquer them. More surprisingly, Emperor Thistle had allowed most of these declarations to stand, apparently deciding that costly military campaigns weren't worth the effort. "Admiral," interrupted the sensor operator, "we're detecting phase signatures from multiple human vessels. Looks like the patrol fleet is returning from the Rigel sector." Park watched as a dozen human ships materialized around the Morning Star, their crews returning from routine patrols that had once been unthinkable. Human vessels now regularly traveled throughout what had been imperial space, monitoring trade routes, investigating disputes, and providing assistance to anyone who requested it. Captain Yoon's face appeared on a secondary screen, his patrol vessel's bridge visible behind him. "Admiral, we've completed the circuit through the former imperial mining colonies. All systems report stable conditions. The Zephyrians on mining. Station 7 send their thanks for the medical supplies we delivered." "Any signs of imperial interference?" Park asked. "None, ma'am. If anything, imperial forces seem to be pulling back from contested regions. We encountered Admiral Kextar's patrol group near the Epsilon system, and they actually transmitted greetings. And safe travels." Park smiled at that. Kextar had become an unlikely ally in the past year, one of the few imperial officers who seemed to genuinely understand the new reality. His reports back to Emperor Thistle had been instrumental in preventing military incidents between human and imperial forces. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some imperial hardliners still pushed for military action against humanity, while certain human colonists wanted to expand more aggressively into former imperial territory. But cooler heads had prevailed on both sides, helped by the obvious benefits of peaceful coexistence. Trade between human and imperial space had increased by 300% in the past year. Scientific exchange programs had led to technological breakthroughs that benefited everyone. Most importantly, the constant threat of galactic war had been replaced by something approaching genuine peace. "Admiral," said Commander Kim, "the latest reports from our embassy on the imperial capital show continued democratic reforms. Emperor Thysul has established elected advisory councils on over 200 worlds. It's slow progress, but it's real change." Park nodded, watching the stars through the bridge's main viewport. Humanity had never set out to reform the galaxy. They had simply wanted to protect their own independence and way of life. But by demonstrating that there were alternatives to conquest and domination, they had sparked changes that were spreading throughout civilized space. "The universe is big, enough for everyone," Park said quietly, echoing Captain Lee's words from the treaty signing. "We just had to teach the galaxy how to make room." The Morning Star continued its patrol, a symbol of humanity's new role as protectors rather than conquerors. In the distance, ships from dozens of species went about their business in space. That was finally truly free. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had shown it that conquest wasn't inevitable, and that, Park reflected, was a much greater victory than any military campaign could have achieved.